Sister Fox, help us, whimpered the couple. Know what I advise? Said Giovannuzza. Go hide in the stove. I'll give you the signal when they've all gone. Papa Ogre and Mama Ogress obeyed. They crawled into the stove and once inside, pleaded with Giovannuzza. Giovannuzza, dear, close up the mouth of the stove with 3 branches so they won't see us. Hi Yarnsters! Are you excited for another story with Teacher Nina? This story today has all sorts of characters in it. A boy, a fox, a king, a princess, a pear tree, and an ogre. And it came from Italy. I can't wait! So, without further ado, let's get started. The story is called Giovannuzza the Fox. There once was a poor man who had an only son, and the boy was as simple-minded and ignorant as they come. When his father was about to die, he said to the youth, whose name was Joseph, Son, I am dying, and I have nothing to leave you but this cottage and a pear tree beside it. The father died, and Joseph lived on in the cottage alone, selling the pears from the tree to provide for himself. But once the season for pears was over, it looked as though he would starve to death, since he was incapable of earning his bread any other way. Strangely enough, the season for pears ended, but not the pears. When they had all been picked, others came out in their place, even in the middle of winter. It was a charmed pear tree that bore fruit all year long, and so the youth was able to go on providing for himself. One morning, Joseph went out as usual to pick the ripe pears and discovered they've already been picked by somebody else. How will I manage now? He wondered. If people steal my pears, I'm done for. Tonight, I shall stay up and keep watch. When it grew dark, he stationed himself under the pear tree with his shotgun, but soon fell asleep. He woke up to find all the ripe pears had been picked. The next night, he resumed his watch, but fell asleep right in the middle of it, and the pears were again stolen. The third night, in addition to the shotgun, he carried along a shepherd's pipe and proceeded to play it under the pear tree. Not long after Joseph stopped playing his pipe, Giovannuzza the Fox, who was stealing the pears, thought Joseph had fallen asleep, came running out and climbed the tree. Joseph aimed his gun at the fox, and the fox spoke. Don't shoot! If you give me a basket of pears, I will see to it that you prosper. But Giovannuzza, if I let you have a basketful, what will I then eat myself? Don't worry, just do as I say, and you will prosper for sure. So Joseph gave the fox a basket of his finest pears, which she then carried to the king. Sacred crown, she said, my master sends you this basket of pears and begs your gracious acceptance of them. Pears? At this time of year? Exclaimed the king. It will be the first time I've ever eaten any in the season. Who is your master? Count Pear Tree, replied Giovannuzza. But how does he manage to have pears in the season? Asked the king. Oh, he has everything, replied the fox. He's the richest man in existence. Richer than I am? Asked the king. Yes, even richer than you, Sacred Crown. The king was thoughtful. What could I give him in return? He asked. Don't bother, Sacred Crown, said Giovannuzza. Don't give it a thought. He is so rich that whatever presents you give him would look paltry. Well, in that case, said the king, very embarrassed, tell Count Pear Tree I thank him for his wonderful pears. When he saw the fox back, Joseph exclaimed, But Giovannuzza, you've brought me nothing in return for the pears, and here I am starving to death. Put your mind at rest, replied the fox. Leave everything to me. Trust me when I tell you that you will prosper. A few days later, Giovannuzza said, You must let me have another basket of pears. But sister, what will I eat if you carry off all my pears? Put your mind at rest and leave everything to me. She took the basket to the king and said, Sacred Crown, since you graciously accepted the first basket of pears, my master, Count Pear Tree, takes the liberty of offering you a second basket. I can't believe it, exclaimed the king. Pears freshly picked at this time of year? That's nothing, replied the fox. My master takes no account of the pears. He has so much else far more precious. But how can I repay his kindness? Concerning that, said Giovannuzza, he instructed me to convey his request to you for one thing in particular. Which is? If Count Pear Tree is so rich, I can't imagine what I could do that would be fitting. Your daughter's hand in marriage, said the fox. The king opened his eyes wide. But even that is too great an honor for me, since he is so much richer than I am. Sacred Crown, if it doesn't him, why should it bother you? Count Pear Tree truly wants your daughter, and it makes no difference to him whether the dowry is large or not so large, since no matter how big it is, beside all his wealth, it will only be a drop in the bucket. Very well, in that case, please ask him to come and dine here. So Giovannuzza the fox went back to Joseph and said, I told the king that you are Count Pear Tree and that you wish to marry his daughter. Sister, look at what you've done. When the king sees me, he will have me beheaded. Leave everything to me and don't worry, replied the fox. She went to a tailor and said, My master Count Pear Tree wants the finest outfit you have in stock. I will pay you in cash another time. The tailor gave her clothing fit for a great lord, and the fox then visited a horse dealer. Will you sell me for Count Pear Tree the finest horse in the lot? We won't look at prices. Payment will be made on the morrow." Dressed as a great lord and seated in the saddle of a magnificent horse, Joseph rode to the palace with the fox running ahead of him. "Giovannuzza!" he cried. "When the king speaks to me, what shall I reply? I'm too scared to say a word in front of important people." "Let me do the talking and don't worry about a thing. All you need to say is, 'Good day' and 'Sacred Crown,' and I'll fill in the rest." They arrived at the palace where the king hastened up to the Count Pear Tree, greeting him with full honors. "Sacred Crown," said Joseph. The king escorted him to the table where his beautiful daughter was already seated. "Good day," said Count Pear Tree. They sat down and began talking, but Count Pear Tree didn't open his mouth. "Sister Giovannuzza," whispered the king to the fox, "has the cat got your master's tongue?" "Oh, you know, Sacred Crown, when a man has so much land and so much wealth to think about, he worries all the time." So, throughout the visit, the king was careful not to disturb Count Pear Tree's thoughts. The next morning, Giovannuzza said to Joseph, "Give me one more basket of pears to take to the king." "Do as you wish, sister," replied Joseph. "But it will be my downfall. You will see." "Put your mind at rest," exclaimed the fox. "I assure you that you will prosper." He therefore picked the pears, which the fox carried to the king, saying, "My master Count Pear Tree sends you this basket of pears and would like an answer to his request." "Tell the count that the wedding can take place whenever he likes," replied the king. Overjoyed, the fox returned to Joseph with the answer. "But, Sister Giovannuzza, where will I take this bride to live? I can hardly bring her here to this hovel." "Leave that up to me. What are you worried about? Haven't I done all right so far?" Thus, a grand wedding was performed, and Count Pear Tree took the king's beautiful daughter to be his wife. A few days later, Giovannuza the Fox announced, "My master intends to carry the bride to his palace." "Fine," said the king. "I will go along with them so I can finally see all of Count Pear Tree's possessions." Everyone mounted horses, and the king was accompanied by a large body of knights. As they rode towards the plain, Giovannuzza said, "I shall run ahead and order preparations made for your arrival." As she raced onward, she met a flock of thousands upon thousands of sheep and asked the shepherds, "Whose sheep are these?" "Papa Ogre's," they told her. "Keep your voice down," whispered the fox. "Do you see that long cavalcade approaching? That's the king who's declared war on Papa Ogre. Tell him the sheep are Papa Ogre's and the knights will slay you." "What are we to say then?" "I don't know. Try. They belong to Count Pear Tree." When the king came up to the flock, he asked, "Who owns this superb flock of sheep?" "Count Pear Tree!" cried the shepherds. "My heavens, the man really must be rich," exclaimed the king. overjoyed. A bit further on, the fox met a herd of thousands upon thousands of pigs. "Whose pigs are these?" she asked the swineherds. "Papa Ogre's." "Shh! See all those soldiers coming down the road on horseback? Tell them they are Papa Ogres and they'll kill you. You must say they are Count Pear Trees." When the king approached and asked the swineherds whose pigs those were, they told him, "Count Pear Trees." And the king was quite glad to have a son-in-law so rich. Next, the king's party met a vast herd of horses. "Whose horses are these?" asked the king. "Count Pear Trees." Then they saw a drove of cattle. "Whose cattle?" "Count Pear Trees." And the king felt ever happier over the fine match his daughter had made. Finally, Giovannuzza reached the palace where Papa Ogre lived all alone with his wife, Mama Ogress. Rushing inside, she exclaimed, "Oh, you poor things! If you only knew what a horrible destiny is in store for you!" "What has happened?" asked Papa Ogre, scared to death. "See that cloud of dust approaching? It's a regiment of cavalry dispatched by the king to kill you." Sister Fox, help us!" whimpered the couple. "Know what I advise?" said Giovannuzza. "Go hide in the stove. I'll give you the signal when they've all gone." Papa Ogre and Mama Ogress obeyed. They crawled into the stove and once inside, pleaded with Giovannuzza. "Giovannuzza, dear, close up the mouth of the stove with 3 branches so they won't see us." That was just what the fox had in mind, and she completely stopped up the opening with branches. Then she went and stood on the doorstep, and when the king arrived, she curtsied and said, "Sacred crown, please deign to dismount. This is the palace of Count Pear Tree." The king and the newlyweds dismounted, climbed the grand staircase, and beheld such wealth and magnificence as to leave the king speechless and pensive. "Not even my palace," he said to himself, "is half so beautiful." And Joseph, poor man, stood gaping beside him. "Why," asked the king, "are there no servants around?" In a flash, the fox answered, "They were all dismissed since my master wanted to make no arrangements whatsoever before first knowing the wishes of his beautiful new wife. Now she can command what best suits her." When they had scrutinized everything, the king returned to his own palace, while Count Pear Tree remained behind with the king's daughter in Papa Ogre's palace. Meanwhile, Papa Ogre and Mama Ogress were still closed up in the stove. At night, the fox went up to the stove and whispered, "Papa Ogre, Mama Ogress, are you still there?" "Yes," they whispered in a weak voice. "And there you will remain," replied the fox. She lit the branches, made a big fire, and Papa Ogre and Mama Ogress burned up in the stove. "Now you are rich and happy," said Giovannuzza to Count Pear Tree and his wife, "and must promise me one thing. When I die, you must lay me out in a beautiful coffin and bury me with full honors." "Oh, Sister Giovannuzza," said the king's daughter, who had grown quite fond of the fox. Why do you talk about death? A little later, Giovannuzza decided to put the couple to the test. She played dead. When the king's daughter saw her stretched out stiff, she exclaimed, "Oh, Giovannuzza is dead! Oh, poor dear friend. We must have a very beautiful coffin built at once for her." "A coffin? For an animal?" said Count Pear Tree. "We'll just pitch her out the window." And he grabbed her by the tail. At that, the fox jumped up and cried, "Penniless man, faithless, ungrateful wretch! Have you forgotten everything? Forgotten that your prosperity is due to me? You'd still be living on charity if it hadn't been for me, you stingy thing, ungrateful, faithless wretch." "Fox!" begged Count Pear Tree, all flustered. "Forgive me, dear friend. Please forgive me. I meant no harm. The words just slipped out. I spoke without thinking." "This is the last you'll see of me." And she made for the door. "Forgive me, Giovannuzza. Please remain with us." But the fox ran off down the road and disappeared around the bend and was never seen again. The end. There you have it, my Yarnster boys and girls. What did you learn from this story? Remember to be grateful to everyone who has helped you in the past. Don't ever take anything for granted. Just because for any reason they are not around anymore, that doesn't mean what they have done for you in the past didn't count. We need to always be a good person because good things will happen to good people. Count your blessings and always tell those who have helped you how grateful you are for them. Until next time, this is Teacher Nina. Goodbye!